All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining Microsoft National Office Hours on January 25th. We are excited to have all of you with us. I'm Andrea.
And I'm the temporary host, Dwayne.
And we're excited to have Craig with us today to talk about Copilot Studio.
Yay.
Over to you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Perfect. Thank you. I always feel this uneasy pressure from Dwayne and Andrea if I'm using present in Teams correctly with PowerPoint and all that. So I've made the first hurdle. So Copilot Studio we'll talk about today. It is the artist formerly known as Power Virtual Agents. And so just to refresh, Microsoft Power Platform is 5 applications included: Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Pages, and Power BI. Copilot Studio, right here in the center, is now what used to be Power Virtual Agents. And so I just wanted to, I got two more slides, and then we'll get into the demo fun. So you may or may not have heard this thing called Copilot. We have it out there. If you look here at the top, you have all the flavors of Copilot that are becoming available. So Copilot for M365, the service and sales Copilot, which are part of an add-on or a complementary Microsoft offering that are available within Dynamics or work as part of business applications. But within each of the Dynamics applications and within the Power Platform, all of those have Copilot embedded within that. So the sales is a particular function. So if, for example, you are using Salesforce.com, you can use Sales Copilot to leverage the AI functionality within Salesforce and integrate with Teams and Office and all of that. So that's what the sales and service components are. And then we have Microsoft Copilot Studio. So you can leverage any of these Copilots, or what I'm going to show you today is you can build your own Copilots. The next piece is, so Copilot Studio, you can build your own Copilot. You can customize that. I'll get into some of that as we're talking through. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So let me stop this. Stop presenting. Now I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. We're still good. Again, successful navigation in between. I am proud of myself. So a few disclaimers that I've presented here enough so everybody should know. I know enough to be very dangerous. I have been able to build, as part of what I like about Copilot Studio is I have been able to tinker and play probably more so than any other of the Power Platform components. So what we've done here is I've built a Copilot Studio. And again, if you take just from your portal and then from there make your Power Platform, we still haven't updated all of our naming. And if you've worked with us long enough, you'll know in the next 3 to 9 months, we'll probably change something else in the naming convention. So you're good there. So I picked the Minnesota State University system, just because we're doing some stuff with them. All I've done is pointed Copilot at their main page for the state system. The state system includes, I think, roughly 30 schools. And so when I look at Copilots and I want to look at what I'm doing, so I pointed it here. And then I have the option, I can add subsites. So these are a couple schools that are part of the 30 that are available. In addition to websites, I can also point to a SharePoint site. So if I have procedure manuals, or I have documentation or policy or handbook or guides that have not yet been moved to a digital format, they're still in a document format, I can upload those. I can still stash them in a SharePoint folder and point it there. For purposes of the demo, I can include documents, but as you can see, there's a file size limit. So I have that piece there. So I've showed you that. So here now I could just say, you know, what are the colleges included? And so it is now coming back and looking at what the sites are that I have here. And what you'll find is there's reference guides to, it will footnote where did it find the information. So Minnesota guide here, I can click on this, it'll take me out to that site. So I can now start to interact. Tell me more about admissions. And so I can start to interact and improve my experience with it. So this is pulling from the St. Paul because it's one of the sites that it found within. Okay. If I wanted to get specific, so for example, what degrees are available at Mankato? So Mankato was not one of the sites that I pulled, but what it did was it went to the main page within the main page from the overall state system. If I change that and said, what are degrees? St. Paul, it will then point to the St. Paul page. And so you can see here, it's now pulling directly from that. Okay. So that piece there. Now, one thing I wanted to show is we come back up into this topics. So within the topics, there are standard ones that come. There's nothing you can do. They're available, lesson 1, lesson 2, those kind of things. But one thing you can do is you can create your own topics. And so part of the thing that I like here is, so if I want to create from a description, let's say I'm creating an option around enrollment. How do I enroll? One of the challenges that we find when customers are talking about their bot experience or their tool that they're using is I may not ask the same question the same way. And what you can see here is AI is automatically creating enrollment management, how to enroll, enrollment process, register for class, admission information. These are all of the AI generated phrases related to the topic that I just created. I can come in here and edit that. So if I want to add, if I want to delete any of these out, if I want to add additional phrases, I can do that and start to trigger how I want this to behave. Another example is I can't open a case. So if I want to create a case, again, here are the phrases. I want to open a support ticket. So if I were to say open a support ticket. So now what I'm saying here is, here are multiple options. So I just wanted to show, here's the question. I have the options yes. And so now it's going to come back and it's going to tell me what we're doing here. Let's collect some information. So all of this, I'm defining this information. I can authenticate based on student ID. I can authenticate based on information. I can walk through a series of information. So if I wanted to do Craig Hogan at Minnesota State. So great, now here's my student ID, so forth and so on. So now it's doing it. I can enter information here. And if I want to tie this now back to a customer service or a support ticket system, I can have that ability to tie this information that I'm entering, and it will all pass into my ticketing system. It's worth noting, there's no way I would have known what kind of code. All I did was go out and did a search on Bing to say created a JSON adaptive card to collect specific data, and it gave me the code, and I dropped that in. Okay. And then the last thing you can do is within the, within the topics is I can also embed videos. So here's something I want to do. How do I prepare for a networking event? So if I now say, how do I prepare a networking? So I now can have this, and this is again just pulling from a site that within the site, and then I can launch this so I can build that information as well. Networking event topics, showing that. Those were the big things that I wanted to just kind of cover from the standpoint of Copilot Studio. I was able to do all of that myself. So again, when it comes to how do we start to enhance the experience, how do we tie this off? If you are using Azure Bot Service, if you have gone down the path of building bots using Azure, now I have an ability to use this Copilot Studio and advance the starting point. So your traditional bot generation is going to be a little bit, there's more code intensive. Here, I can get a little bit further along without doing that. And I can't see the chat or any questions. So let me just stop for a second and see. Oh, good. Gary's on here. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it. So Gary's on flagging questions. Go ahead, Scott.
There's my mute. So one of the big questions that have come up so far, so we've been using Azure Cognitive Services and indexing with that SharePoint preview. And that's been pretty straightforward. We're pretty excited about how much this simplifies. Yeah. During like the weeks plus of work we did over there. Like it looks like this is probably a couple of mouse clicks away in here.
Yeah.
But one of the things we kind of immediately ran into is kind of confusion about the licensing, which is we've gone and got the studio trial licenses, the 25 free ones.
Yep.
Signed that to a user. They built out our test. They then publish to a user without the studio license, but that user does have a Microsoft 365 A5 for faculty license. And they can't get to it. So they're basically getting an error saying that don't have access, they're not licensed for it.
Yeah.
We're wondering, does that mean, so under the old bot framework, you had to have both, like a creator license, and then you had to have a tenant-wide license. Do we still have a tenant-wide license, or is that coming to the education SKUs as a free thing? Or do we need to engage with resellers and Microsoft team to get tenant-wide licensing to even use these things?
I know Gary's on, so I'm going to tag him. But generally, Scott, you're right. So there's a maker, like a $0 maker SKU, so you can make sure whoever's building or whoever you want to do that, you can do that. And then the conversation packs or interactions are licensed at 25,000. Gary mentioned in the chat there, 25,000 packs. And so think of a session as interaction between a user and the bot, and back and forth counts as, so my question is 1, the response is 2. However, if the bot is using generative AI to respond to the session, then it adds a second one. So if I ask a question and it responds with a generative AI answer, that's 2 coming back. So I would be at 3. There's full analytics within the tool, so you can start to measure how effective is the bot at answering questions, so that you're not running them up, going back and forth, and things like that. So,
and that's a shared tenant-wide pool, or
Yep.
Is it selectable per Power Platform environment?
You can change you can change how you want to allocate it.
Okay. And that brings up my last question, getting into that, which is so with pretty much anybody being able to do these, and they automatically, without knowing anything about anything, are automatically going to put it in our default environment. what do we expect as far as like ununderstandable costs?
Yeah, so the first suggestion I would make there is if you have not, and Gary, if you could drop it in the chat here, if you have not downloaded or installed the Power Platform Center of Excellence Toolkit, I would highly recommend you do that. We do have unified workshops that can work you through that. We do have partners that have offerings around that. But when it comes to visibility, Scott, across the tenant, across the environment, and how do I know who is building what data is it doing, how do we leverage all of that? That would be my first line of defense in terms of understanding who are the curious folks on campus that are out clicking on things and waiting for it to say no, and it still continues to do that. You can also then there are policies that you can have to determine what data folks have access to, what connectors, all of that. And then there are ways to disable trial environments and things like that. So I would say that's as good a starting plate as any. Gary, do you have anything you want to add there?
Sure. So we have a lot of questions about the governance of it, right? And so I do talk to organizations who just black and white, right? Just kill all trials so people can't explore. There's an issue with that, right? Because then that's where you get shadow IT because I don't have access to stuff that I just wanted to try. And totally understand maybe the situations where people might have thought that uses resources or is a risk, but I can cover that in another situation. But when it comes to the governance for anything in the Power Platform, just like Craig said, right, being able to create a chatbot that's actually going to be published to be used, and especially like what you were saying earlier, like what environment is it in? So, you can turn on the data loss prevention policies. You can set it up so that only certain users have that ability to create a chatbot in a production environment, or you can open up like sandbox environments for people to explore, because maybe at the end of the day, you want people to try this stuff out, but in a safe place. So if you do have questions about that, like you can feel free to email me and Craig, but those things are definitely in the art of the possible. If you do have unified support, they have the workshops to kind of show you how to do that, not just from the Copilot Studio stuff, but for Power Automate and for Power Platform, Power Apps. So the screenshot I put into just the chat itself is, the first landing page. So if I want to know who my tinkers are, kind of what Craig was saying, or who the makers are, who's curious. Just today I was showing him like, hey, we have some customers who are going way over on their AI builder credits, right? They might be building something that's very important, and when we enforce the things on that, right, as far as like, hey, you're going way over because you've done it for 4 months, that stuff might turn off. But how do they know who's doing it, who's building it, and what are they doing it for, right? So having that one-stop shop for all things Power Platform, for governance, data loss prevention, et cetera, is definitely the way to go if you're already not using something like that. We do have tools out of the box, but it's a little bit more manual and it's not as pretty as I would say as a dashboard. But you name the governance situation. Hey, I want to nurture, or maybe I want to control or monitor. That's definitely the direction I would suggest going.
The other thing I would just caution, if you have not done the toolkit and then we go down that road, just to prepare everybody, it will create more questions initially than it will answers. Just full disclosure. But what happens is it starts to identify, where do we really need to focus? Where do we really need to hone in on? Hey, let's do this initial workshop to understand what is in front of us. And then if we want to do an ongoing or follow-up, then we can do that. So just in full disclosure, more often than not, it creates more questions than answers. But that is part of the overall journey. I would say that is something that should happen in parallel. As part of the toolkit, for example, there is an intake form. So part of the Power Platform challenge is, how do we identify use cases? How do we consolidate pricing? What license mix do we look at? How do we consider that? Those are a lot of things that we can start to leverage some of these components to start then ideating on this use case. These 3 use cases can be done with a single Power page, for example. So, but yeah, and I think Dwayne mentioned your CSAM absolutely can share information. We do have 1-pagers, and I will get those to Andrea so she can share them when she sends this out. And then, but at a minimum, I will tell you, if there's any questions at any point, feel free to reach out to me. I can get you connected to the right person. It's not your job to know who of the thousands of people supporting your account. to go to for what. So we can help kind of marshal who and what for whatever needs you have.
So there's, to clarify, so is access and use only the AI credits now? So that would make sense because the test was probably done in the default environment, and we've turned on the setting that denies AI credits except for where we've assigned, and in Power Platform. So that would make sense. Or do we also, in addition to AI credits, need in the old architecture before Studio, you had to have there had to be 2 licenses always, which was the tenant-wide whatever thing that was hard. I never did find the SKU for, and then the per user creator license. So I'm just kind of saying, has that been replaced with the AI credits, or are there 3 licenses plus involved, right?
So on the old licensing, didn't matter how many, I think Craig said it earlier, like it didn't matter how many builder licenses you had, those were free, like you said. And more often than not, if you all have a reseller and then they sell you Power Virtual Agents, but not they don't give you the SKU, so to speak, that means, great, I have all these credits I can't use. So for anyone who's interested in that, just make sure that if you have a reseller that they also provide you with the free, I would say, builder SKU, right? So that you can assign that role to somebody. So it's the same thing. Now it's just, I would say, build a little bit differently. So you'll still need these people to be assigned the role, or assigned the license for building, but they're still free. And it's still just at the tenant level. And from the tenant, you would be able to say, hey, I have this many messages allocated to it, and then so the HR department gets 50,000 because that handles all of our HR stuff. This organization gets this many, and so and you just watch over time, and then can kind of figure out if you need more or less. So as far as the model, the only thing that changes, instead of just sessions, right, how many times the bot gets accessed, it's how many times back and forth you're talking to that particular bot.
Okay, so maybe a bell just rung, or I got off track. Are you saying that we don't actually need separate per user Studio license to purchase? That we should be able to get those for free? Right,
those are free. You do need to purchase one Copilot Studio license for the tenant just to say it's on. But now that it's on, now let me hand out tokens or passes, so to speak, for people who are allowed to build bots.
Okay.
And then consumers.
That makes more sense.
And the consumers don't need a license, because the people using the bot might be internal or external, so you can't license them. You know what I mean? So it's like, just how much back and forth are you doing with that particular bot?
And so the other ones is a $0 order through a reseller, right? Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just remember to order it, or make sure that they add it to the order.
Yeah,
you can't assign it. Yeah.
That's up next for the account.
We may or may not have run into issues in the past with people not being able to do things and realize that $0 one has been left off. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because I think what threw me off is the availability of that trial license.
Yeah. And there are a couple other links that we can share that speak to turning off trials and things within Power Platform as a whole. Just, again, depending on where you are organizationally and who has access to what, or who you want to do, what that gives you the ability to kind of at least limit some of that.
Do you all mind doing a real quick overview of Center of Excellence for Power Platform, just so that folks know the value of that workshop? Because I think we hear so often of, oh, it just ended up in my default environment and now I don't know what to do. So that folks kind of understand what that workshop is, because I think we say that one a lot, but we haven't really explained it. And I think the two of you would do better than me.
Let me see. Go ahead, Gary. Let me see if I can find the write-up.
Now, there's a public site where the artists formerly known as PFEs, now CSAs and CSAEs, have just for biz apps, for all the different things that are Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. So they maintain this list here. I'm just putting the URL in here, and this is all of them. but let me double check as I'm sending this out if the write-up for what's in the Center of Excellence data setup is in here too. And we have internal facing things that I'd have to like download a PDF to send it out to you. But let me see. Extending Power Platform governance with COE, activate. This one's really nerdy. Hands-on COE by identify types. Binary site. Okay, so if you go there, it's like all the way on the bottom. So the link that I put in here for all the different offerings, one of them in there is about, it says Activate Power Platform Admin, and so that's the governance with Center of Excellence Toolkit. But if it's easier, I would suggest if we do have any CSAEs that deliver this one pretty often, have them come and show what one looks like. I know that I will have access to an environment that looks like a fully lit up Center of Excellence toolkit. Unfortunately, because I'm the only developer in my environment, it looks boring because it looks like here's all my developers, here's all the apps that we're building. It's just Gary in Texas versus, hey, I have a real organization where I've got these set up. But if your organizations already have it installed and you want to do some show and tell from your side, I think that would be a good thing to show also, because it doesn't really show you the data, it just shows number of apps, who they are, what kinds of things that they're building too.
Awesome. Well, this was all super helpful. Craig.
Yeah, this is just the one, I guess the 2-pager on the Activate the Power Platform governance with COE. So I'll make sure that we include this. And I agree. I think Gary's point is valid. Maybe we can get maybe Dwayne, we can ask Nick or Natalia. I know Natalia does, and we can find somebody to come on and kind of maybe speak to the Center of Excellence Toolkit and what that workshop looks like and how we're able to leverage that, at least to get that process started.
Yeah, I had to stay quiet because even though I'm a CSA, I'm not a Power Platform CSA, so I would mangle it.
Well, and hopefully I'm allowed. If I'm not, I'm sharing my screen. I don't think I'm showing anything that I'm not supposed to, right? Like, it is all about this, right? At the end of the day, monitoring, governing, and nurturing people growing this. And if you look, all the chat bots, all the environments, as I mentioned before, so I have an older version of the Power BI report that I'm going through right here. It's kind of boring because it's just Gary, right? Who's building all these apps? Gary. Who's building all these chat bots? Gary. Who's sharing this and that? So, but imagine this at scale where it's showing you where in the world your makers and users and all that are, but being able to kind of dig into that. So if I'm more along the lines of AI builder, like I was mentioning to Craig, hey, this customer is going double over for all their AI stuff, right? Like, where are they? Who are they? What environments? And hey, I would say if I was an admin of this environment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or for HR, hey, they keep going over. I don't want them to stop using chatbots. That means that's a success, right? Meaning that the chatbots are keeping the HR folks from having to answer questions, or it's being helpful. So now that I know that ahead of time, let me reallocate or get more messages for them, right? So this is, like I said, the one-stop shop that's a lot prettier than just looking at, I would say, the admin center, which is more about doing things versus having, I would say, just the visibility to react.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Thanks, Craig and Gary, for jumping in, and Dwayne for helping me co-host today. And we will look forward to seeing you all next week with some fabulous topic that I'm going to work on right now. And we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye, Steve.
Thank y'all.